Today we're going to discuss a question that really most people should be asking themselves, and if they're not asking this question, then unfortunately they might wind up with an unpleasant surprise later on in life. And the question is, what happens to a soul after it leaves this world? Part of Judaism obviously explains that we have an eternal soul within, and the hidden teachings, the teachings of Kabbalah explain in quite detail what happens, what is the journey of that soul once a person passes away. And so we want to get into that a little bit today. In general, we're told that there are basically two places that you can go. There's, I guess, the 5-star hotel, and then there's the, we'll call it maybe, you could compare it to maybe jail, would be an interesting human analogy. But basically, the soul can either go to a place called Gan Eden. It's really a world for souls. It is often called Olam Haba, the world to come. Not to confuse it with the idea of the world to come that comes at the end of the entire 6,000-year period, when we will greet Mashiach and there'll be a revival of the dead. That world to come is the ultimate world to come that comes at the end of this entire story of our life, so to speak. But as a borrowed term, we discuss Gan Eden, we call Olam Haba because it comes after a person dies. So there's an idea of Olam Haba that comes after the entire span of life, 6,000 years are finished. And there's an Olam Haba that comes when a person's personal life is finished, and it's his Olam Haba, so to speak. And that Olam Haba could be Gan Eden, which is a place where the soul takes pleasure in experiencing divine revelation. It's a world of reward. It's called a world of reward. The soul is rewarded in it to a certain degree for its good deeds, the mitzvahs that it has done. And certainly if a soul manages to stay clean and free from sin, then that's all he has to experience. The great tzaddikim that we know come into this world, the leaders of the Jewish people, the very holy role models that we have, they leave the world and go straight to Gan Eden. There are different stories that mention how when a tzaddik passes away, so it's a great, great simcha in heaven. And all of the tzaddikim and all of the the angels in the upper world, that they're all aware of this great event, that this great tzaddik is coming now to the higher realms, and they greet him with great, great joy, and it's a great simcha. That's for the great tzaddikim. But unfortunately for the average person that has a mixture of good and bad, so the story isn't so simple. There's Gan Eden is of course a place that is still available to the average person, because again, he's done hopefully many mitzvahs. But we introduce another place that he can go, that is Gehenom. Gehenom, in English, the term's used as hell or purgatory. Really, Gehenom is also a world for souls. But it's a world for souls to go to that have, unfortunately, through either a lack of performance of mitzvot, but more so because of transgression, have to go to in order to cleanse and purge their soul of the blemish of sin. Sin damages the soul. It's something we have to be very clear about. Just like fire burns and can be very destructive, so too sin is, compared to a spiritual fire, it burns. It damages the neshama. The analogy given is the idea of a soul becoming dirty, or when you take the idea of taking minerals from the earth, gold, for example, that we see is so beautiful and shiny, that's after a lot of work goes into refining and purifying that gold. But if we would look at a piece of pure raw gold from the earth that's mixed with all kinds of things, it would look ugly and tarnished. So one example they give is that example, that through sin, negativity and blemish attach itself to the neshama, and it has that appearance, that ugly, tarnished appearance. And just like we throw the gold into the fire, a really hot fire to purify it and purge it of its blemishes, so too the soul must go through, so to speak, the fires of Gehenom in order to become cleansed from its sins. With this idea, we can appreciate the whole concept of Gehenom. It's not really punishment for the sake of punishment. There's no idea in religion about a God that sits above and says, you betrayed me, now you will suffer. Chas v'shalom, that is not at all the approach of what the whole concept of Gehenom is about. Gehenom is actually something there to help us. You know, if a person, for example, has a beautiful white shirt, spent a lot of money on it, one of these designer shirts, we want, a lot of money, and he unfortunately tarnishes it. He gets it dirty, stained, so he doesn't want to throw away the shirt. The shirt is very important, very valuable. So what do? We take it to a dry cleaner with a laundromat and we fix it. That is an example that we're given for the idea of Gehenom. Kapara, for example, the word kapara, which translates to atonement, to become atoned for one's sins, is from a language of cleansing and cleaning, scrubbing and getting out the blemish. So really, kapara is connected to cleansing. And that's what the soul must go through. It must go through a cleansing period, a stage where to become clean and restored to its former beauty and glory. Then it becomes ready to go to Gan Eden, the world where souls have a benefit and bask in the revelation of divinity. And so we can appreciate what Gehenom is in this context. Gehenom is really there for us. There is actually a story brought from one of the great Kabbalists that was, had involved himself in trying to help souls that had left the world, speaking with one of the, like a heavenly guard appointed over different souls. And on an occasion, speaking to this guard, spiritual entity, he was explained that the court in heaven is not at all looking for vengeance, looking to get even. Its purpose is to evaluate the person's case, meaning his sins, and prescribe him a remedy, like a doctor prescribes medicine. And they prescribe what is necessary in order for the soul to become better, to perfect and heal and cure the soul. And once that's accomplished, the soul happily, they see the whole soul go to Gan Eden, the world of souls that is very positive and beneficial. And so that is really the purpose of Gehenom, is really there for us. And that is a big misconception that most people are not aware of, that souls go to Gehenom for their own good, as a result and a consequence of their actions. Now there is a third idea I want to talk about, and with this will conclude today's discussion of what happens to the soul after it passes away. And that is one more option, unfortunately, that exists for souls that are so bad in their lifetime that Gehenom is not enough to fix them. Meaning that they're so bad they cannot even get into Gehenom. And that is a very scary thought. Imagine, you're begging, pleading, please let me into Gehenom, and they're trapped, they're stuck out of Gehenom, because even Gehenom has its limitation as to what type of soul it can fix. And so these souls that are so wicked and have done such damage to their neshama are sentenced to much harsher penalties, could be hundreds of years that they have to, wander in an in-between stage where they suffer tremendously. We're not here to scare everybody, but there are midrashim that speak about this. There's a famous midrash with Rabbi Akiva that speaks about a soul that was so bad that it was trapped and it suffered for a long, long, long time. And one of its suffering, we'll just mention one, was that it was decreed upon that soul to gather wood for fire, and he would have to gather it, and then they would burn him alive in that fire. This is, of course, all happening in a spiritual sense, but they would burn him in that fire repeatedly, over and over again, for an amount of time that we would, cringe at the thought of how much time he was going through that suffering, and all that was before he could go to Gehenna. And of course, Gehenna is itself this very harsh, suffering. The Ramban explains that the suffering of Gehenna is worse than the suffering that we find in the book of Eov, of Job. So it's something that we should all really take very seriously. If that's not enough to scare a person into behaving, so then I don't know what is. And with that in mind, even of course we're not robots, and it's hard for a person to instantly change his life to becoming a tzaddik, but knowing how real the troubles that await us if we neglect our responsibility in this world will hopefully give us a push in the right direction. And it's interesting, with the small push, let's imagine this road is downhill. So again, up the hill, it's a little bit hard. But once you have a push and it's downhill, you can go very far. Once we push ourselves in the beginning, it might be hard to change our habits, to change our ways. But once we give that push, then it gets easier and easier. And before you know it, you'll be standing in the place of the tzaddikim. And you'll have that opportunity to go when your life is over to Gan Eden instead of, unfortunately, the other ideas that we mentioned today. May we all merit a judgment of mercy, and may we all merit to see the good that awaits us in the afterlife.